So first of all, tell us, what do you do at VMware?
I'm the director of the Open Source Technology Center at VMware. This is part of our Open Source Program Office, and the Open Source Technology Center is the engineering side. So open source is part of every product that VMware ships, and it's important to us that the projects that we incorporate into product are viable, and also that the projects that our customers use integrated with our products on their sites are also viable. By viable, we're talking about projects that have healthy contributor guidelines, that have regular cadences with their releases, respond to issues, have healthy reviews of code so that they have good code quality, and also are projects that we expect to be around for years to come. And so I don't mean to say that this is an altruistic effort. Certainly we choose our projects carefully that we invest in, but when we do invest in these projects, we look to do so from for the benefit of those projects and those industries. And so sometimes that means code, right? Sometimes they need new features or more robustness or refactoring or something like that. But sometimes it means, hey, we need some people leaders in the SIGs, we need more mentors, we might need document writers, we might need people that are just better at adding stronger communication within the projects, responding to issues, providing guidance in their Slack channels, reviewing code on mailing lists. All those things are areas in which the engineers on our team contribute to the projects that we work on.
So what is the relationship between your center and the open source office, right?
Dirk Hoндel started the open source program office in 2016, and that team at the time included some program managers and some engineering, and as the team grew, we found that we had a need to consolidate some of the engineering under another lead, and so while I joined VMware as an individual contributor, I was asked to pick up the director role of the team, and I started that in September of 2017, so just about a year now. So the Open Source Program Office has got a side that deals with what we call inbound, which is how we use open source, and so that is primarily staffed by what we call our open source program managers, and they work to define process, we work to define policy, closely with legal, of course. And then, so those are our peers within the organization, and then my team is the engineering side. I talked about how our team contributes externally to these projects, but of course, we are one team. Even here at the conference, we have 3 of our program managers give talks at the Open Source Summit, and I think that's a remarkable change in our industry. To see so much effort around proper use of open source at an event like this. So we also work internally within the company. So together with our PM teams, we work across the business units within VMware to try and develop open source competency throughout the company.
Have you always been in the position like director, or before that you are purely in engineering roles?
I've been an individual contributor most of my career. I definitely have a type, if you will. So I joined IBM's Linux Technology Center directly out of college after 4 internships, 2 of which were with the Linux Technology Center. From IBM's Linux Technology Center, I joined Intel's Open Source Technology Center. So I've always been in these weird little groups within bigger companies that focus on open source. Throughout all of these roles, I've worked in and around the Linux kernel. So I've done some scheduler work, memory management work. I led the real-time Linux team at IBM. And at Intel, I worked primarily in the Yocto project, but also led an open source board program, the MinoBoard program, towards my last years at Intel, I was leading what we called, it's a little presumptuous of a name, but what we called the software working group in the functional safety global domain. And what that meant was I was leading our efforts with respect to how do we qualify complex software for safety critical systems. So I've always been an individual contributor in that sense, but those roles, if you kind of look at them, have sort of naturally tended to a space where I tried to solve higher level problems. You can often code your way around a problem, but a lot of problems aren't solvable with code. And I think of myself as generally a problem solver. And so what I found was I would always find that I needed to reach out and incorporate another team or bridge technical domains so that we could get a proper root cause solution as opposed to maybe working around a symptom. What that has ultimately led to is a role where you are bridging teams, and that's effectively what I do here at VMware. I have several teams that work for me on different technology domains, and that's the way we organize our team, whether it's orchestration or service mesh or serverless, Linux kernel, tracing, real time, security and identity, and even IoT and edge. So together we're able to solve bigger problems. And from a broader company perspective, I'm in the position of being able to not just bridge these technology domains, but also the business units within the company. We find one of the things is the Open Source Technology Center is often that hub that will pull in groups that are working on products and say, hey, we're working on something that all intersects in this one place, and if we get together, we can do more together.
How important is open source for VMware?
Open source is in every product that we ship. And so it is really important to us that the projects that we incorporate are healthy. Our customers continually come to us wanting to incorporate open source projects in their own deployments. And so from the products that we make to how our customers use our products, open source is it's critical. It's not a hey, it's the thing that we can do if we have time. This is mission critical for us.
You came from the kernel community. I mean, not came from. You're still active part.
I still maintain a small subsystem of the Linux kernel with a co-maintainer from Intel. Yeah.
And then you are, heading, global teams. So when you look at it, what is the big problem? Technology or people?
I think it's definitely a mix. I think right now we are experiencing a period of growth that is forcing us to expand the way we look at some of the problems that we solve. So one of the things that I've focused on this last year has been what seems like maybe a petty or even trivial thing, which is just revision control. I spoke at the Open Source Linux Summit on a talk called Change, and I've given this talk internally, and it's about understanding the responsibility that we have when we are contributing changes to projects, because it's so much more than the code that we contribute, but it's, hey, how do you affect not just the file that you're working on or the project that you're contributing to or the product within your company that consumes that project, but how that project is used around the world. Each of us in the open source communities that we work in have the ability to affect how software behaves on a global scale. My first experience with that was at Kernel Summit in Seoul when Keys presented on some of the security experiences that he had gone through, and one of those was in a vulnerability in a convoluted portion of the Linux kernel that I had contributed to in the past. That ultimately had resulted in the spying on political enemies and unstable governments. So our responsibility is huge. Van Jones here emphasized the responsibility that we bear. But to the other side, our communities are growing. And so while I think it's important that we continue to instill sound engineering principles, individual developer responsibility, and how we document our code, how we refactor our code in small functional changes, I also think that the base of contributors is growing. And projects or systems like GitHub have democratized access to things like revision control. And so whereas before a new engineer would spend time on second level tech support solving customer problems that would ultimately get them looking through the Git logs or the RCS logs or whatever it happened to be at the time, and they'd be pulling their hair out screaming at these engineers that didn't document their changes very well. But we tend to skip that step now and developers go directly to contributing to repositories. And so that has increased the number of developers that we're working with. It's increased the demand for expert advisors, for reviewers, for maintainers, if you will, but really people that are collecting these changes, that are curating these changes. But they will not be able to cover this scale. We also have to, in my opinion, add automated tools that allow us to better check for common mechanical failures in the way that we contribute code, that do automatic security scanning, that allow us to stay ahead of, use these tools to be able to keep pace with the increased scale of change. So I think there's that technical side, or there's that human side for sure, but we also have the ability to add some tools to help us manage this, the human factors.
While we're talking human factors at VMware World, you had Malala, and yesterday you had Van. So, what was your, takeaway after listening to them?
Well, other than looking away and wiping your eyes as you hear Malala speak, youngest Nobel Peace Prize winner, who endured so much to talk about forgiveness on stage. She embodied everything that was good and kind and generous. She is an amazing human being. But I think the thing that she said, so many things that were impactful, but I think the thing that I took away from that was, she said, education is the path to freedom, and education is the path to independence. And I felt that was really meaningful. She talked about the research that shows that for, I don't remember the number, for all the girls that are unable to get an education around the world, if we were to invest in their education, that's a $30 trillion boost to the global economy, and that you cannot make a better investment. And then Van Jones here spoke. The one thing that he said that really stood out to me was, when someone shows interest in you, when someone leans in to ask you a question or to hear your response, your IQ points go up 30 points, right? I'm sure that's a very specific technical research-backed number, but the idea that we are more confident in how we speak and what we say, and are able to just, I think his words were, say things you didn't even know that you knew. I've experienced that myself. When you're talking with somebody that is genuinely interested and not just trying to make their point, I think we all give our best selves in that situation. And so I think as a community, I think we need to talk less and listen more.
No, let's switch all the gears. Let's just change the car altogether and not talk about VMware, not talk about open source, not talk about people and human and changing the world. Let's talk about you for a while.
All right.
Okay, so what do you do in your free time? What is your hobbies?
My what?
Free time.
Sorry, I don't. Oh, no, just kidding.
So you're saying you don't have any free time, right?
So when people ask me, hey, what are your hobbies? I collect hobbies. That's my go-to line. But currently, I really enjoy architectural visualization.
What is that?
So over the years, I've done a lot of remodeling. I enjoy improving things. I like solving problems, and it doesn't stop with code or projects or teams or organizations. I look at portions of my house. I can make that better. So I evolved from drawing on paper to working in QCAD to working in SketchUp, and I would create these models, and it's actually a really great tie into open source, actually. I was posting some of my visualization, so I would model these in SketchUp, and then I would render them through a tool called Kirkathea that was written by a company named Solid Iris at the time. And I was posting just these renders. They're made to be photorealistic renders. It's a physical lighting renderer. And I would post these, and I met Anthony Cavazos on Google+, and he reached out to me, and he just opened my eyes to this broader world of photorealistic rendering. And through a long sequence of events, I ended up joining my then Minoboard efforts in building an embedded render farm with Anthony that we presented in Dublin at ELCE. So open source covers it brings all these things together. But over the years, I've continued to work with him to develop my just skills in architectural visualization. So I have since modeled my entire house, and I mean down to the doorknobs. And whenever I do a project, I go through these iterations. And back when I was much more active on Google Plus, I would share these iterations. I think we went through 20 iterations of my kitchen design on Google Plus, where I've got a bunch of engineers commenting on, well, this would be more efficient if you'd move the refrigerator to that side of. But now I've taken that to a level where I'm doing landscaping, and landscapes are boring without trees. So my scenes are now up to 11 billion polygons, and they have photorealistic trees and plants and grass, and I've started putting in what I call paper people to make sure that, because I get the question several times of, so this is done now? I'm like, no, that's the rendering. So it's sometimes at a distance easy to confuse it with a photo. So I enjoy this from the technology perspective. When I was starting to run out of CPUs, I would provision a renderer in the Google Cloud Engine and quickly get access to 100 CPUs and 300 gigs of RAM. And so my current effort is to figure out how do I get this pipeline working with some of the new GPU and virtualized GPU technology that's out there. But that, of course, is a new technology domain that is still very much hardware specific. As we're abstracting everything else, we still end up with these hey, I need this card at this level on this container. So yeah, that's something that I do spend all that free time on.
Yeah, because I follow on. I've seen all those renders, and at one point it was confirmed this morning, but I always thought you were a German because you're so precise there, and all those rendering that I've seen. Because when you're working on you actually don't have any idea what it will look like. You do think, okay, we are getting a couch, we are getting these tiles, we are getting this, but you have no idea what it's going to look like in the end. Mm-hmm. So yeah, those were really incredible and
Thank you.
Amazing. What is the story behind your photo? Your profile pictures?
Oh,
why
the half face exactly. or the burning windmills?
The half face, first of all. I'm sure there is some science, some hardware technology, some German technology behind it.
I should come up with a really great story for why that is. But the truth is, my wife and I were visiting our in-laws, and I was setting up a profile for one of these apps. I said, "Oh, I need a new profile picture," and I held my phone and I took a picture of my face sitting on their couch downstairs, and the sun was coming in through the window, so it was all kind of bright on one side, and so I just chopped it. If you find me on Google Plus and Facebook, though, you'll find it's mirrored. So it was left brain, right brain.
Oh, wow.
Was the idea. I don't think anybody really picked up on that. But I should probably change it, because I think that picture is probably 10 years old now.
Yeah, but it has become kind of a signature also.
It is.
Actually, that's how, that's him,
Yeah. Of course, it doesn't work so well at work.
Yeah, because the people see, no, you're you're full face.
You got like a whole face now.
Yeah, whole face, no. Yeah. So thanks for, stopping by today and talking to me, and I hope that this is, though it's first one, but not the last one. We should continue this, every time we meet, we should do an interview. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you.